The virtual CISO moment is brought to you by vCISO Services. vCISO Services' mission and calling is to provide quality cybersecurity and information security consulting and expertise for small and mid-sized businesses. While they are a leading provider of qualified and experienced virtual CISOs, they offer much more. Check them out at vcisoservices.com. Home and quick strike for Monday, May 1st, 2023. We're already a quarter of the way through the year. Can you believe that? We're also coming to you from our new studio in Studio 2A, we call it, which we will be doing some of our broadcast from as we continue with Second Chance Publishing. And we start today from Bleeping Computer. Hackers target vulnerable Veeam backup software servers exposed online. Veeam backup servers are being targeted by at least one group of threat actors known to work with multiple high-profile ransomware gangs. Malicious activity and tools echoing Fin7 attacks have been observed in intrusions since March 28th, less than a week after an exploit became available for high-severity vulnerability in Veeam backup and replication, VBR, because we have to have acronyms, VBR software. Tracked as CVE 2023-27532, the security issue exposes encrypted credentials, never good, stored in the VBR configuration to unauthenticated users in the backup infrastructure. This could be used to access the backup infrastructure hosts. Now, the software vendor did in fact fix this issue on March 7th and provided workaround instructions. Hopefully, if you're a user of this, you know that and you have that. But on March 23rd, Horizon 3 pen testing company released an exploit for CVE 2023-27532, which also demonstrated how an unsecured API endpoint could be abused to extract the credentials in plain text. An attacker leveraging this vulnerability could also run code remotely with the highest privileges, theoretically. At the time, Huntress Labs warned that there were still approximately 7,500 internet-facing VBR hosts that appear to be vulnerable. A PCI magazine asks if multi-factor authentication has failed us. Now, PC Magazine always promotes the idea of multi-factor authentication whenever it's available. Without MFA, they say, someone who steals, hacks, or guesses your password can access the related account. When MFA is engaged, of course, the password isn't enough. Getting into the account also requires another factor like a fingerprint or a security key, or I would also add maybe a location. But these are things we already know. Now, they do say here, and I kind of disagree with this, for personal accounts, MFA is usually optional. And I don't think that, yes, it's optional, but that you should treat it as optional. You should always use MFA whenever you have the chance. But they go on to say that businesses can require it for access to their internal systems. More companies than ever, no real stats there, they just an assumption, support MFA, yet 2022 was a terrible year for data breaches. No stats there either yet. Did MFA fail us? So, a lot of qualitative statements without quantitative backup, but we'll go on. A presentation to the RSA conference in San Francisco, that was last week, if you're not aware, explored this topic in detail using prominent examples of data breaches involving MFA. The presenter, Dave Taku, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Dave. If I'm not, I apologize. Dave is the Senior Director for Product Management and User Interface at RSA Security, a company whose business includes providing MFA to businesses. Now, the article does correctly note that RSA Security is not directly related to the RSA conference. Taku noted that according to one survey, 78% of organizations were using MFA in 2022, up from 28% in 2017, which is a huge increase. So why are the successful attacks on the rise is the question that he's thinking about. And he presented a quote from author and philosopher Aldous Huxley for the audience's consideration. Quote, there is a law of reversed effort. The harder we try with the consensus will do something, the less we will succeed. Is that what we're facing? He's wondering. The harder we try with MFA, the less successful we're becoming at it. I would argue, again, Taku is saying this, that in this particular case with MFA, maybe the law doesn't apply. It's not because MFA is becoming less effective, it's because the attack surface is increasing. Now, Taku discussed these three specific attacks involving three different vectors. So, number one, MFA configuration, the MFA provider, number two, and the MFA user, number three. None attacked the authentication technology directly. Rather, they circumvented it. Quote from Taku, MFA is still your best defense. And we got something interesting about someone who got a little bit in trouble for stealing some Bitcoin, and we'll talk about that after we roll this in 30 seconds. Bitdefender provides cybersecurity solutions with leading security, efficacy, performance, and ease of use to small and medium businesses, mid-market enterprises, and consumers. Guided by a vision to be the world's most trusted cybersecurity solutions provider, Bitdefender is committed to defending organizations and individuals around the globe against cyber attacks to transform and improve their digital experience. And gets 4 years for stealing bitcoins seized by the feds. This, according to Info Security magazine. An Ohio man has been sentenced to 4 years and 3 months behind bars after stealing 712 Bitcoin, which is worth $21 million US, which were seized by its investigators following the arrest of his brother. Interesting little tidbit there. Gary James Harmon, 31, of Cleveland, stole the cryptocurrency, which was the subject of, quote, pending criminal forfeiture proceedings in the case of his sibling, Larry Dean Harmon, according to the Department of Justice, DOJ, because we like acronyms. Now, Larry Harmon was arrested in February of 2020 for operating a dark web cryptocurrency mixer known as Helix. It was used to launder over 350,000 Bitcoin, what valued at the time of the transactions at over 300 million US dollars, but which are now worth 10.3 billion US dollars. The funds came from customers operating on dark web markets, according to the DOJ. Now, during Harmon's arrest, law enforcers seized a cryptocurrency storage device containing funds generated by Helix, which were subject to forfeiture, meaning they were confiscated by the state. However, investigators were unable to recover the Bitcoin stored on the device due to built-in security features. Interesting stuff. Now, remember how we talked about Italy was banning ChatGPT because of privacy concerns? Well, the Hacker News now reports that ChatGPT is back in Italy after addressing those data privacy concerns. OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, has officially made a return to Italy after the company met the Data Protection Authority's demands ahead of its April 30th, 2023 deadline, which is as of yesterday. The development was first reported by the Associated Press. OpenAI's CEO, Sam Altman, tweeted, quote, "We are excited ChatGPT is available in Italy again." Now, this reinstatement comes following Garante's decision to temporarily block access to the popular AI chatbot service in Italy on March 31st, 2023, which is about when we also reported it to you, over concerns that its practices are in violation of data protection laws in the region. Now, generative AI systems like ChatGPT and Google Bard primarily rely upon huge amounts of information freely available on the internet, as well as the data its users provide over the course of their interactions. And that's an interesting point there because that's what um, the Samsung issue, I think it was back a few weeks ago, where they provided some information about their internal operations when they were trying to just use ChatGPT for some issues. Anyway, OpenAI, which published a new FAQ, frequently asked questions for those who are acronym deficient, said it filters and removes information such as hate speech, adult content, sites that primarily aggregate personal information, and spam. It also emphasized that it doesn't, quote, actively seek out personal information to train our models, and that it, quote, will not use any personal information in training information to build profiles about people, to contact them, to advertise to them, to try to sell them anything, or to sell the information itself. Now, that said, according to the article, the company did acknowledge that ChatGPT responses may include personal information about public figures and other individuals whose details are again accessible on the internet. European users who wish to object to such processing of their personal information can do so. This is a GDPR thing, I would imagine, by filling out an online form and even exercise their right to correct, to restrict, delete, or transfer their personal information contained within its training dataset. Interesting to see how this all unfolds with regards to really specific privacy regulations such as GDPR. That's why I like tracking it. Something a little bit different from cyber reports, CISA or CISA or CISA, depending upon how you want to define the acronym for the U.S. Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. I don't think that there's any agreed upon way to do that, so I like CISA or CISA. I'm not even sure now at this point in time. But they warn of critical bugs in Illumina DNA sequencing systems. So between CISA and the FDA, they issued an allergen alert about two vulns that impact Illumina's Universal Copy Services, UCS, because we like acronyms, used for DNA sequencing in medical facilities and labs worldwide. A quote here: an unauthenticated malicious actor could upload and execute code remotely at the operating system level, which could allow for attacker to change settings, configurations, software, or access sensitive data on the affected product. And this is from a CISA advisory released earlier. Now, Illumina is a California based medical technology company that develops and manufactures advanced bioanalysis and DNA sequencing mechanisms. The company's devices are one of the most widely used for DNA sequencing in clinical settings, re- research organizations, academic institutions, biotech firms, and pharmaceutical companies in over 140 companies or countries. Quote, on April 5th, 2023, Illumina sent notifications to affected customers instructing them to check their instruments and medical devices for signs of potential exploitation of the vulnerability. This is from an advisory from the FDA. Continues, some of these instruments have a dual boot mode that allows the user to operate them in either clinical diagnostic mode or RUO mode. Not sure what that means. Our device intended for RUO are typically in a development stage and must be labeled for research use only. So I guess that's what RUO stands for, research use only, not for use in diagnostic procedures, end quote. Though some labs may be using them for tests for clinical diagnostic use, which would seem to be against the whole idea of that classification. Now, the first bone is tracked as CVE 2023-1968. They have a score of 10.0 or 0, which is critical. It allows remote attackers to bind to an exposed IP address, allowing an unauthenticated attacker to listen in on all network traffic to find further vulnerabilities on the network. In other words, it's bad. The potential impact of this flaw includes sending commands to the impacted software, modifying settings, and potentially accessing data. So check that out if that's something in your org. Now, Security Affairs says that Theos cybersecurity researchers have shown this week, which would be last week, how they seized control of a European Space Agency or an ESA satellite. That's never good. So during the third version of SciSat, the European event dedicated to cybersecurity for the space industry, the ESA set up a satellite to test bench, inviting white hat hackers to attempt seizing control of the OPSAT, a nanosatellite operated by the agency for demonstration purposes. So that's a very important point here. This is not a critical use. This is as I say, for demo purposes. So the offensive cybersecurity team at Thales demonstrated how to take control of the ESA satellite and considered the worst first ethical satellite hacking exercise here. The exercise it aims at assessing the resilience of satellites to cyber attacks. According to classified U.S. intelligence documents, China is developing capabilities to seize control of the satellites operated by, to them, hostile sites. So this particular satellite, the OPSAT, is only 30 centimeters high. It was launched in December 2019, and it contains experimental computer 10 times more powerful than any ESA air, spacecraft out there, which is interesting. Quote, the ESA challenged cybersecurity experts in the space industry ecosystem to disrupt the operation of the agency's OPSAT demonstration nanosatellite. Participants used a variety of ethical hacking techniques to take control of the system used to manage the payload global positioning system, attitude control system, and an onboard camera. Unauthorized access to these systems can cause serious damage to the satellite or lead to a loss of control over its mission, obviously. Now, the Thales team demonstrated how to access the onboard system of the satellite, then used standard access rights to gain control of the application environment. The team identified and exploited several vulns in the satellite systems to inject malicious code. The experts were able to compromise the data sent back to Earth, including the images captured by the satellite's camera. So think about that for a second. Images that you think are from the satellite may not be correct. You could intercept them or you can modify them for your own political game. So this is a rather interesting. I won't go through the rest of this article, although Thales did point out that throughout the entire exercise, ESA had access to the satellite systems to retain control. So in other words, this to me sounds more like a demo, and a good demo in that you want to make sure that you use dev platforms, if you will, to find vulns before you go operational. Security intelligence puts forth why people skills matter as much as industry experience. We've talked about this on the podcast, that it's not just about the technical experience you have, but you definitely have to have soft skills. Now, from this article, according to a survey of tech industry workers by RAIN, REIGN, 76% of managers thought soft skills were more important for success in tech jobs than compared to 44.9% who said tech skills mattered most. Even more interesting, tech employees felt the same way. Employees, 72%, ranked soft skills as most important, with 42% believing tech skills were valuable. And this is one of the reasons why I've said beforehand that one of the certifications that I found most valuable in my cybersecurity career has been the Toastmasters competent communicator and competent leader. And I know that they've changed certification since then. But the point being, it's about communication. And there's also soft skills. Empathy is one of the big things we need to understand and develop in cybersecurity. So the article goes on to say, yes, tech skills are a must for those working in cybersec. That's a given, but even the most brilliant cybersecurity expert in the universe isn't going to be very effective if they can't share their expertise with others. True. And their brilliance can only go so far if they can't collaborate with others who bring different skills to the table to create an innovative product or services. And it ends here with overall, a team member with poor people skills holds the team back and makes it very challenging to function as a high performing unit. Now I'm going to pivot here to our list, and I had a little bit of technical issues, so I can't bring this up. But and this is going to be a little bit difficult for me to do because of the fact that it's like kind of like a slideshow. But this is from gizmodo.com, and the link is in the show notes. But it's 6 key moments from House Republicans' hearing on warrant-free FISA surveillance. So I just have to go ahead and start the slideshow here. We'll see how it goes. The first item is, it looks like that Representative Jim Jordan suggests cutting FBI off from FISA altogether. Um, Most of the lawmakers speaking during the hearing Thursday agreed Section 702 likely required reforms, but few seemed willing to abandon the practice altogether. That's the first one, if I am reading this correctly. And then we go to the next one. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee hints at wielding foreign surveillance program against the alleged Pentagon leaker. Texas Democrat Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, though acknowledging some privacy advocates' concerns regarding Section 702, appeared far more reluctant to advocate for reforms than their colleagues on the committee. That's number 2. I'm thus far not terribly impressed with this particular. We'll do one more and we'll see where it leads us. And number 3, the FBI director refuses to say how much data it collects on U.S. citizens. I'll leave you, the gentle listener and viewer, to view the rest of this. This doesn't seem to be quite the newsworthy. I'm not saying it's not newsworthy, but it doesn't really fit into the genre of what I like to do with lists. I thought there was going to be something a little bit more succinct. It does sound a little bit more political, and I certainly don't want to go down that path here on the virtual CISO moment quick strike. And so that's what we have for today. Tomorrow, we've got a great interview, of course, on the Tuesday episode, and then we'll have the throwback on Thursday. And I appreciate your patience, if you will, if this particular episode is a little bit different from before. Again, trying all this in Studio 2A, it's all new. Figure we just give it a run through, and if it works, we're just going to let the episode go. And it seems that everything has seemed to work pretty well. So in that case, we'll let it go. We're obviously going to get better with what we do because that's our goal. We just want to help and serve you. So until next time, stay secure.